All right, we'll just wait a minute to allow everyone to enter and join us for this pre-Arctic summit. Always exciting to see everyone joining us this evening or afternoon or morning, depending on where you are in the world. You can see for those who have joined, there's a comment in the chat. We'd love to hear where everyone is signing in from. And of course, in the chat box, you're welcome to, interact with all the other folks that are visiting. There is a Q&A box at the bottom. If you click underneath the images of our faces, you'll see Q&A, and any questions that you want to ask the panel this evening, please just add them in there. Although we do have the chat, we will not be checking the chat area for questions. So please do put any questions you have in the Q&A. There will also be polls. We're going to run a couple of polls throughout the summit. So your eyes peeled for that. Wow, look at this. Rupert from Svalbard, Paolo Longyearbyen, Amy from Queensland, Carla from BC, Thomas from Toulouse. We've got people coming in from all over. Sebastian from Chile. We'll just wait another minute as people join. Also, just a reminder that this will be recorded and posted to YouTube. So if you have to leave early or, anything like that, this will be posted later on the YouTube channel for anyone to be able to watch it. John from Iceland, Philip from Ukraine. Sarah from Germany, a little bit of the whole world. I love it. Okay, so for anyone who's just joined, we've got the chat box for chatting. We've got the Q&A underneath our faces. If you have a specific question for the panel during the time that we're together this evening, we will do our best to stick to 90 minutes. It is a lot of stuff to cover, but 90 minutes is our goal. We're going to stick to it. And I will go ahead and start introducing our panelists. We have quite a big panel this year. I'm excited. So first of all, I'm Heather Thorkelson. I'm the moderator this evening. I have worked in the polar industry for about 15 years, and I am the vice chair of the Polar Tourism Guides Association board. I'm also the founder of Polar Tracks Expeditions, which is a polar cruise agency staffed exclusively by guides. We also have Troels Jacobsen from AECO. He is the field operations manager. He has over 10 years of expedition guiding, and his work ensures safe and professional operations in the polar regions. We have Franka Leiterer. She is the operations and field safety person at UNIS and the president of the Svalbard Guide Association. Franka is an experienced Arctic guide and field safety expert who works to raise guiding standards in the polar regions and trains professionals at UNIS. She combines a deep local knowledge with a strong passion for collaboration in the polar world. We have Ivik Knudsen-Ostermann, I hope I pronounced that correctly, who is the owner of Greenland Cruises. Ivik was born and raised in Greenland, and his company, Greenland Cruises, offers expeditions along the Greenlandic coast. His local expertise and passion for sharing Greenland's beauty make him a true ambassador of the region. We also have Jeff Nagel. He has over a decade of experience guiding in the Arctic and Antarctica. He leads Aurora Expeditions' Polar Bear Safety and Firearms Program, ensuring safety in remote operations across polar regions. Michael Callaghan, an Arctic expedition leader, welcome. With over a decade of experience, Michael leads polar expeditions for Silver Sea Cruises. He's passionate about Arctic history, wildlife, and Indigenous cultures. We have Daniel Stavert, who is also an Arctic expedition leader. He spent 10 plus years guiding in remote places and as an expedition leader in Greenland. A climber and kayaker, he brings his love for wild landscapes and wildlife to every expedition. And last but not least, we have Graham Charles, who is the founder of the Polar Tourism Guides Association, the PTGA program director, and he also sits on the board of directors. With 35 plus years in outdoor skills training, Graham has been working in the polar regions for over 20 of those years, and he's dedicated to raising the standards in polar guiding. And I would be remiss not to mention Sarah Marusi. We have her in the background running our tech, and she is also the PTGA's executive director. So wearing a lot of hats. Thank you, Sarah, for making this possible. So with all of the introductions out of the way, we are going to get started with an update from AECO. So, Troels, I was hoping that you could start by giving us a bit of an overview of the main points that you would like to share from AECO with guides this season, and also are there any new resources available to guides that they should know about for this season?
Thanks, Heather. Thank you, everyone, and hi, all of you who are attending. Yeah, there's quite a lot of stuff happening, obviously, in the Arctic region for this coming season, and a lot of it will be for you staff as well, primarily expedition leaders. Obviously, they have to take care of quite a number of new regulations and bits and pieces around. Starting off in Svalbard, we have new regulations in place for the first time that we're going to work with those, which is going to be an interesting challenge. Limited amount of sites available. The limitation in the terms of the sites are in the protected areas, but they are pieces of coastline. They're not specific points on a coastline. They are actually sort of coastline bits, which also means that, for example, in regards to the sites that AECO is using in the cruise database, for example, in the ORAD, we may actually have more than one site within an available coastline or allowed coastline to visit. So not quite 43 sites are available within the AECO sort of perspective at the moment. A little more than that, thankfully. Worthwhile remembering that it's allowed to go on snow-covered ground and frozen ground until 25 May on the west coast, primarily on the west coast, even in those areas that are not allowed to land, generally speaking, after 25 May. So that's worthwhile notice for those of you who are there in the early season. Obviously, polar bear regulations that are going to be extremely interesting to see how that pans out this year. We have a 500-meter active distance until 1 June in Svalbard, and then it turns to 300 meters active distance. So be conservative. It's our best advice. Very conservative when it comes to polar bears in Svalbard this season, more so than normal. The definitions of what it means to disturb or pursue or lure, it has been defined now. Actually, last year for the document. It's called Proposition 47L, which is the document that went to Parliament. But in that document, it's actually defined what it means, these things, and these are pretty strict definitions of what it means to disturb a bear. It's just about any behavioral change. So be very conservative with that and try and stay away from that as best you can, basically. In terms of Greenland, it's also going to be interesting. I don't know if Ivik is going to. You may know a lot more about that as well, a lot about it. There's not too much change in terms of last year as of yet. In practical change, we're still waiting for some zonation. The new Tourism Act is pretty extensive, actually, and has a lot of consequences for many of our operators eventually, and not so much perhaps this particular season. What we may get this season is these zones in different fjords. The fjord, it could be just like you probably all know in Scoresbysund, in East Greenland, we have an area of a no-go zone, we have a slow-go zone. That sort of zonation will come up other places in Greenland as well. It's been decided by the new Tourism Act, and it's now with the municipalities in Greenland to decide where those zones are going to be and what kind of restrictions there may be within any given zone. This is not quite there yet. The work is ongoing, and we're waiting to hear what the outcome will be. no doubt that AECO members certainly, and I'm sure you will too, hear about it from us, perhaps if it comes for this season at all. There are some interesting things in the Tourism Act. You're allowed to do trips from A to B, but actually, if you're not a 2/3 Greenland owned, you're not allowed to do any tourism activities outside of the vessel. We have understood the legislation from the authorities that we've been talking to, that operators that have been in Greenland and operating in Greenland in the past have sort of a grandfather period up till 2027, season 27, to get this right with the ownership and all. Otherwise, you have to sail from A to B with your passengers and have local operators that fulfill the demands to deal with all tourism activities. Obviously, that can have some impacts. Those that are new for this year, have never operated in Greenland, are supposed to live by these rules already. We'll see how that pans out. There is an exemption scheme, which apparently is going to work for areas where there are for example, no local operators to help you out doing your tourism activities. We're just not exactly sure how it works officially. So operators and members have been recommended to contact the ministry to find out, basically, to be sure. AECO specific, well, we have a new cruise database and live scheduler, which I hope will be a success. I'm sure those of you who've been working in the Arctic extensively have been pretty frustrated and tired with the old system of emailing, and when you try to schedule and change your plans. Hopefully that is all going to change now with the new system, which is good news, I think. I hope. We had a webinar just the other day for expedition leaders, minded expedition leaders. It's on the AECO website. You can check it out, that recording of that webinar, if you're interested. And we have a new polar bear guideline coming up. It's not been finalized just yet, but it will be coming up, adjusted to new regulations. We have a new walrus, or updated walrus guidelines, updated cetacean guidelines, and we're also making a final sort of tweaks on a rockfall guideline that we're gonna add into the systems, into our operational systems, sort of within, well, shortly, I think, it's safe to say. And of course, last but not least, we also have the ORAD, the Off-Vessel Risk Assessment tool. We are about to implement, or we have implement a new option for risk assessment for small boat cruising, shuttling, the testing phase, and it turned out not to be quite as easy as expected. So it may actually mean that users will have to download or delete the old app and install a new app. Contact your employer to get the link for that download if we get to that. Otherwise, if you're registered already, you should be able to use your old registration credentials, so log-on credentials for that. So hopefully that'll be out soon, and of course it's a little updated as well. Keep it updated, sync with the server, with the cloud when you can, when you have a good Wi-Fi connection. There are quite a lot of updates coming in all the time. It's a link to the cruise database and live scheduler. So the same types of restrictions and guidelines that are in the live scheduler is also in the ORAD app or just on the phone. So, but keep it updated. It's quite important. I think that was enough for talking for just a moment, at least. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Troels. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in, but it's fantastic. And just a reminder to anyone who joined a little bit late, if you have any questions about anything that we're discussing on the panel, please put them in the Q&A. If we have time at the end, we will absolutely attempt to answer those questions. So I'm going to circle back to Svalbard for a second, because of course we do want to know what's happening with the Svalbard guide standards. So Franka, perhaps I could ask you to weigh in on this a little bit, since you are quite active on the ground with this stuff.
the good part is, in a way, it's going to be much shorter than what we heard before. So there aren't any major updates so far. So we haven't gotten any information that there is anything approaching soon. But there are developments on the mainland. So in Norway itself, they're developing a guide standard for the mainland itself. So there is definitely there is a progress and there is a process as well. And I do expect that maybe in October there will be changes, or a new suggestion will be maybe be up for discussion. We don't know yet. But as we see that there's also a big development in Norway, I do expect there will be some changes within the next 1 or 2 years.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Troels, is there anything that you wanted to add to that from AECO's side of things, or?
No, I mean, Franka, I've been involved as well as Franka with that work with these communications with authorities and so on, and the work leading up to this, the feedback that the stakeholders have been able to give to the process, and we haven't heard anything else. Franka has a good update there, and yeah, we're standing by to see what comes out. My understanding is that the proposal as was basically the original proposal was pretty much accepted after the hearing process. AECO has been giving input since that to the more official proposal, I suppose it ended up with, but we haven't heard anything since then, and sort of standing by, as Franka said.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So let's move on then to Greenland, because obviously there's been quite a bit shifting with Greenland as well. Ivik, I would love to get your perspective on what's new and evolving for tourism and guiding in Greenland.
Well, this is actually brand new. We finally became a state of the United States. No, that's just kidding. A lot of things going on in Greenland, that's for sure. Not only because of the Americans, but also because of the new tourism law, which was effectuated January 1st. And it will change a lot of things, especially as Troels said, 2/3 has to be owned by a local or a company that's registered in Greenland. When it comes to the cruise segment, the government hasn't decided anything yet that regarding the zones. The government is going to propose some different zones. There are no-go zones, zones that you may go to, zones that you need permission to go into, but it's also up to the different municipalities that they will also have a saying in this. So therefore, I can't really say anything about when a cruise ship comes to Greenland and you decide not to stay in a town, but you go into a fjord somewhere. If you want to do SUP or kayaking, or if you want to do anything, for now, it's not a problem. You can do it, but perhaps in 1 week, 2 weeks, the government will make a decision on this, and then perhaps you will have to use a local company to help you with this. And it's going to be very, very complicated. I even don't know how I can help in this matter. We simply just don't have enough people in the company or anywhere in Greenland that can help with this. So some lawyers are going to be very busy when it comes to that. Another big topic in the tourism business is Ilulissat. We had some difficulties last season with some demonstrations, etc., blockades, etc., in Ilulissat. I think approximately 8 calls were affected by this. And for this season, we really don't know what's going to happen. We have Penang's Le Commandant Jacobsen in Greenland right now, and I'm the agent for Penang, and I was on board, and for the last 2 weeks approximately. Highly recommended. We were supposed to go to Ilulissat, but decided not to go to Ilulissat, and yeah, it was a call made somewhere high up, political reasons, and it's understandable. So instead, we decided to go to Reykjavik, which is south of Ilulissat, and it had a perfect visit. Reykjavik is highly recommended also. There are those who just don't want cruise ships in Greenland. And of course, it's the same in Ilulissat. The main income is fishing, and a lot of the fishermen don't make any business on the cruise ships. So this one guy from Ilulissat Excursions, who don't want outside companies coming to Ilulissat to work during the summer, has a lot of backup with especially fishermen in Ilulissat. Some of my collaborators just had a meeting not too long ago with approximately 20 different business owners, and they all want the business in Ilulissat. So they have written a document that they're going to send to, I don't want to call them the rogues, but the people who are making these demonstrations and blockades. We're supposed to go to Ilulissat again in a couple of weeks, again with Le Commandant Jacobsen, but I have no idea if we're going or if we're not going. 95% of people in Ilulissat want the cruise business. It's very good business, and it's only 3 to 4 months a year that they can make a lot of money on the cruise ships. So we are very excited about it, and very nervous also, because we don't want to see any protests or demonstrations, etc., in Ilulissat, nor in anywhere else in Greenland.
It sounds like it's quite a complicated situation, both with the
It is
changes.
a very complicated situation, very
Wow.
complicated, and yeah, I really have no idea what's going to happen. Nobody does. If we decide not to go there in a few weeks, the first cruise ship of the summer will be HX Hurtigruten. So they're hoping that we're going to see what's going to happen, and so yeah, it's a very weird situation. And the guy who started all of this, he's now the mayor of Ilulissat. So yeah. So there probably is going to be some new local laws in Ilulissat. So yeah, I don't know.
I just got word that there's a question for you in the Q&A. It says, regarding Greenland, is there any talk about different sizes, especially really small cruise ships? I am mostly thinking about ships of 12, 30, or 50 passengers in Northeast Greenland, including the national park. In this area, we also do not have any local guides available anyway. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I really don't know. Of course, when a big cruise ship arrives, it's good business for everyone, but it's not a healthy business. Most people in Greenland don't want the biggest cruise ships here. Of course, in Nuuk, it's okay for them to be here because we have yeah, it's a big town compared to the rest of Greenland.
Mhm.
So I don't think that the government will set a limit for the cruise ships at this time, at least, because frankly we need the business.
Yep. Okay. I see Troels has his hand raised. Troels, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
thanks. I may just add that in the Tourism Act, the new Tourism Act, there's no distinction between the size of vessel. So even if you're a 12-passenger vessel or less, you're still subject to the same law about ownership, 2/3 ownership, Greenland ownership, in order to be able to sail and do any tourism activities outside the ship. But again, Christian, you mentioned the Northeast Greenland National Park, for example. There is supposed to be some sort of exemption plan in place for those areas and regions where there is no offer of local, there's no local business to help at all. And hopefully that exemption scheme will take place and move into so that the industry can actually do some things in these remote areas. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thanks both to you and Ivik. This is really helpful. Franka, you had your hand up there for a second. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I have a question, but maybe we can take it at the end.
Okay, great. And Michael, I also wanted to just check in with you and see if you wanted to add something here as an expedition leader.
No, but just an observation that came across my desk yesterday is the fabled and mythical polar bear viewing guides for Greenland now seem to be a thing and in existence in the south of Greenland very specifically. I've been made aware that there is an operator there that is now licensed for polar bear viewing in the glacier frontage area of that distinct subpopulation of polar bears there. Perhaps Troels or Ivik would have a little bit more information on what the homegrown licensing is right now looking like in Greenland for polar bear viewing guides.
Well, I'm actually also licensed polar bear guide or viewing if there is ever one near Nuuk, which is very rare. You need a license from the government to do that or to offer that. So if you come to South Greenland and if you want to go scout for a polar bear, you must use that company which is in South Greenland. You cannot just go for yourself and have a look.
Yeah, maybe I can add that the area you're talking about, I think, Michael, is there's an area with a concession from a local company that has the concession rights to do polar bear viewing in this particular area. And yes, we had a member last year that came into the area, but not with any intention of viewing polar bears, but just went through, and that local company was not very pleased about them being there, even though they were in their full rights to be there. So do be careful with sailing into areas where there is a concession. It's my understanding, Ivik, maybe you know if there's any updates on that, it's my understanding that this is the only place in Greenland that there is actually a concession area for polar bear watching. There's also a larger area for those that may be working on ships with helicopters. There's a larger area in Southeast Greenland which has a heli skiing concession, and that may be also a tricky thing doing any heli operations in that particular. And it's a pretty large area. In any helicopter operations in that particular area, even if you're not doing heli skiing, it's going to be a little tricky. So be very observant about that. On the West Coast, we're talking mainly angling in rivers, and there are certain rivers up the coast. I don't think actually that our members at least visit these places terribly much. So the risk is probably not great to end up in some sort of conflict area. It is listed as a restriction in the ORAD and the cruise database for you to see if you enter some of these areas. But if you do and you see there's a restriction about concessions in the area, be really also quite concerned about it and conservative when you visit, and don't push it at all with the local concession holder. That would be unwise in the whole sort of scheme of things in terms of how the industry is viewed and perceived in Greenland, especially when you're not Greenland company.
Exactly.
Right. Thanks, Troels.
Always, always, if you go into an area you're not sure about or you don't know 100%, please always reach out to your local agent, your port agent, or ask on Facebook. Greenland is a Facebook country. We were supposed to go to Rasuak with Le Commandant Chico, but we couldn't reach it because of ice in the harbor, so we couldn't use the Zodiacs. So instead we decided to, or the captain of course, decided to go into a fjord right behind. He wanted to visit a small settlement named Gangersluk. It has 4 inhabitants. So and of course there was fast ice, so he decided just to plow through. For approximately, he broke approximately 200 meters of ice, and there was still approximately 2 to 2.5 kilometers to the settlement itself. But at that time, I received like 50 messages saying, "You're destroying the ice. You're destroying the way we live during the winter. Stop, stop, stop!" And of course, the ship stopped. But even though that we stopped, people were already talking about it all over Greenland, that these tourist ships coming to Greenland and destroying whatever. So if you can, reach out to the locals somehow, and yeah, before you go anywhere or do anything that you perhaps shouldn't do, even though you're entitled to do it, even though you're allowed to do it, some people will just look different at it, and one Facebook post can do a lot of bad things. So
Absolutely. That's really great insight, Ivik. Thank you so much. Do you know, this is such a great conversation, and Franka, I don't want to lose the opportunity for you to ask your question if it's related to Greenland. So please go ahead.
Yeah, it is actually regarding ski expeditions. So they are, so that's kind of why I'm asking it, because it's for a lot of the Svalbard guides who also work on Greenland, doing crossing of Greenland by ski. And of course, I know that's a small group, but I know there are a lot of changes there as well. And they are very unsure about next season. And I was wondering if Ivik maybe knows a bit about potential solutions there.
what was the last? Sorry.
If you know if there are any companies that would provide contacts, or they could kind of, because I know there are usually smaller companies,
Yes.
and they are looking for, you know, if they can still run these products by sending the guests then towards a Greenlandic company. What can they do? How can they organize it?
I know of 2 different small companies that offer heli skiing in Greenland. We see every year right now in April several sailing boats arriving to Greenland, and they stay here for 1 to 2 months, offering not heli skiing but randonnée skiing. And they will have a problem next year, or even, I don't know if they're using any Greenlandic companies now, but they will for sure have some problems. But I will happily help with the contact details of.
I was asking more for the crossings. So for the crossing of the
crossings, I really don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right. Okay, thanks, folks. In the interest of time, let's shift over to a discussion about Arctic Canada. So, Troels, is there anything that you wanted to add from AECO's side about this season in Arctic Canada? What's new, what we should know about?
There's not too much sort of updates and new things compared to last year that are affecting field staff. We have various things going on with underwater noise projects and so stuff like that. But it's not something that's going to affect really staff. Hopefully, it's going to affect some of the operators because we want them to be involved. But hopefully, you won't be sort of other than being able to maybe inform that your employer is a part of it and can talk about it. Otherwise, it's pretty much business as last year, with the different no-go zones and things is the same as last year, and not too many different updates that actually sort of very much focuses on field staff.
Okay, great. Michael, you have quite a bit of experience in Arctic Canada. Is there anything from your perspective that you feel will be relevant for our membership to be aware of?
It's a really dynamic time in Nunavut and in the Canadian Arctic. For anybody who's paid attention to current events, we are likewise facing the threat of annexation. But more specifically, there have been a lot of big government announcements with the Canadian election period that's just started, and a lot of investment has been put into Nunavut. Last year, the government of Nunavut signed a devolution agreement, the last step of the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement that's celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. What that means is that the government of Nunavut is taking over control of its land and resources, and the final agreement is meant to be put into place by next year, 2027, pardon me. Likewise, what that means is a lot of money has been made available to the various hamlets for various types of development projects. And a lot of things related to the blue economy are related to this. So Inuit conservation and preserved areas, ICPAs, you're going to be hearing a lot more about this in the upcoming season. This is perhaps much more big picture for operators to get a hold of and for expedition leaders. But there are a couple of new ICPAs that are sort of boiling to life for the 2025 season. They've just very recently been announced. And between now and 2030, we're talking about a total of 13 with quite a bit of funding that's been put forward for this. What does that mean concretely? It means that right now, that area on the approach to Pond Inlet now has a substantial stretch of shoreline that is now included in a new Inuit conservation and preserved area. Concretely on the ground, nothing more than the underwater noise program that AECO has already been a part of on the approach to Pond Inlet. For any ships that are operating in Hudson Bay, there are concerns there with underwater noise projects in partnership with Oceans North. So especially attempting to mitigate disturbance of walrus and narwhal and beluga potentially. So there's a lot of really interesting citizen science initiatives or info that field staff can start adding to their arsenal for the season surrounding all of these things. So a little bit of knowledge for the season, but as Troels mentioned, no big regulatory changes. Although as anybody who, especially expedition leaders who work to Transport Canada are aware, and ship's captain, there seems to be a differing interpretation every time we file a new route plan to go from point A to point B via point C. So it'll be interesting to see what the working group from Transport Canada has to say a little bit later on in May at their webinar to see if there's been any changes to how they wish us to report in. So again, changes perhaps affecting more expedition leaders and bridge teams. I've been speaking quite a bit recently with the Marine Traffic Control Services team in Iqaluit, who are part of the greater Coast Guard array of managing ship traffic in the various regions in the Canadian Arctic. And they've been militating internally for a more refined reporting mechanism for expedition vessels, because the way we're reporting in right now is very much as if we were bulk carriers or ore carriers, and it's not quite fit for purpose for us in the Canadian North. So perhaps we'll be learning a little bit more about that upcoming working group call in May. But other than that, no substantive changes in Canada. If there is one top tip I can give field staff, especially for any operators out there who are still using videographers and photographers on board, is to really dial down on what you're allowed to film from the air with drones and what you are not. So you may have the permitting in place to fly a drone in the Canadian Arctic, but there are a lot of species, marine and land-based, that are considered at risk or endangered. and flying as a drone for anything other than research purposes for which you have a permit from the National Research Council is absolutely a no-go. And it could be very, very easy to get caught out on this. I know we've been talking in the past few seasons, both IATO and AECO, about being mindful about social media posts. Certainly, it'd be quite important to continue to focus on that element in the Canadian Arctic.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. That's really insightful, and Troels as well, really insightful. So let's move on to sort of a general discussion about the whole, everything, all of the changes in the Arctic. And I'd love to get the perspective of some operations people. So Jeff, I'm looking at you. How does Aurora intend to operate now, given that there are some sort of significant shifts in the Arctic?
Yeah. Every year I listen to this meeting, it's just like, oh no. So I think if you're feeling that way at home, that's a pretty sane response. It feels like death by 1,000 paper cuts. But yeah, the new rules and regulations, there's a lot to consider. But one of the main things that we can do is like, how do we set expectations? I think is super important. A lot happens before guests ever even step foot on the ship, and before we ever step foot on the ship as guides. Something that Aurora has done is they've actually put these new regulations onto the website. So written as they read on the government websites. I think that's really important. That way the guests really understand what's happening. And then how we handle it on the ship as well. Briefings are often treated as something that maybe we just have to get through, but onboard briefings are going to make a really big difference, especially in the wildlife viewing realm of things, but also in understanding, for instance, in Svalbard, that there's limited landings. And then I'm anticipating that because there's a lot less landing sites in Svalbard this year, that there's going to be a major increase in Zodiac cruising. And I think that we're going to have an increase in interactions with bears as a result, which isn't necessarily a good thing in the political climate. So challenge your ELs or your company. What is the game plan when you do run into a pop-up bear on a Zodiac cruise? Because you better have a plan of action, because if somebody's watching, your actions better be by the book. I hate to say it, it pains me to say this, but you're going to have somebody in charge, and the idea of Zodiac cruising in a group might have to be the way forward. Can you trust pairs of two to go out by themselves these days? I don't know. You know your teams better than I do. So those are a couple things. And then I also anticipate a lot of ships going 12 nautical miles off coast, both in Greenland and in Svalbard. And I'm seeing the potential for a lot more ice floe landings, which is a high risk activity for multiple reasons. So again, for field staff out there, make sure your team has a game plan. What does that look like? From an SOP protocol standpoint, from the companies, I know we're writing actually Daniel's on here. He's already done an ice landing, but we're adding onto it this season for ice landings in polar bear habitat and what that looks like, and giving a detailed game plan on how to operate there. It's important, and there's probably going to be an increase in all these activities. So, that's just a start. Adding some scopes out on deck, that's gonna be a nice thing for a guest experience. But yeah, there's a lot to consider.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Jeff. And you mentioned Daniel. Daniel, I'd love to get your input as well as an expedition leader. How do you see operations this coming season?
So I've been talking a lot over the last few days with a lot of different people, and including Jeff and I have discussed a lot of these things over the years. I think for me, like, how are we going to operate this season in the Arctic? And I guess the first thing is carefully. Carefully. We always do this. We do operate carefully all the time, but this year particularly, we all need to do our due diligence as guides. And whether it's an expedition leader or a kayak guide or a Zodiac manager, whoever you are involved in the program, we all need to do our due diligence. We need to read our processes, read our SOPs, read these things so that we can stand up and say, yes, I do know the limits that I can play inside. So that's the first thing, is carefully on the due diligence. But another one that I was thinking about as Jeff was talking is the industry is growing up. Across all the polar worlds that we work in, the industry is growing up. And it's an opportunity for us as professionals to display our professionalism. These sovereign nations that we operate within, they are looking at us and asking us, are we adults? Like, are we an adult industry that can be responsible, can be trusted? And this is our chance to show it. So there's lots of different ways about looking at the increased legislation or the increased restrictions that we're under. And I think one of the most constructive ways of looking at it is to say, this is our opportunity to be professionals. This is our opportunity to show that we can do this. And that's, I guess, the first thing. So there's lots of comments that I would make. That's the first, I guess, 2 or 3 that come to my mind straight away. And then the last one that I would add, and then I'll be quiet. But one of that is that it's really important for me whenever I operate in these places is to begin with a position of gratitude. We are in wild, wild places. They are wild for a reason. We want to work to keep them wild. We don't have a right to be there. And therefore, as we operate with the different sovereign nations or government bodies that we are working with, like, we need to come into it being like, we are grateful to be here. And we appreciate that these nations are allowing us to operate. Let's do it right so they continue to do so. So those are kind of I guess some of the framework ideas that I bring into a trip when I come in. Gratitude, professionalism, preparation, like Jeff was saying. So those are my 3 kind of key things.
Excellent. That's really wonderful insight. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thank you.
So we're going to sort of shift gears for just a second here and do a quick poll. Sarah, who's in the background, is going to launch this poll, and the poll is to ask how many years you have been working in the polar regions. We're very curious to see. So just click one of those radio dials. You got 1 to 4 seasons, 5 to 9 seasons, or 10 plus seasons for the very seasoned folks. I didn't mean to make that pun, but so let's see. We'll just give it a minute for everyone to vote so we can get an idea of who's here on the call with us. We've got 52 participants, which is pretty great. Just give it a minute. Okay, so 38% have done 1 to 4 seasons, 35% have done 5 to 9, and 26% have done over 10 seasons. That's pretty awesome. That's impressive. Great. Good to be in such a hardcore polar community.
A lot of old people.
Sorry?
It's a lot of old people.
Old people. Absolutely. All right. So as many of you would know who are joining us today, we did have a Google Forms survey that we sent out asking our membership if you had questions. And of course, we did get a number of questions. So we voted the most popular 2 we're going to address today. The number 1 for the Arctic being, will expedition leaders be fined privately when a colleague, a guide, AB, etc. makes a mistake? So this question didn't talk specifically about place, whether it was Svalbard, Greenland, whatever, but we're assuming that it would be Svalbard. So this question is, again, would an expedition leader be privately fined if there's something that the authorities think was questionable? So I'm going to start by throwing this question over to Franka.
Thank you very much. I guess we can use the beautiful phrase of "it depends." It applies everywhere, but yeah, it definitely depends. So we've seen both. So we've seen on Svalbard that guides are fined, but also companies are fined, expedition leaders are fined. So it's always about what happened, were regulations follow, what was the idea, and I think I can just completely agree to what was said before. If we operate with the certain respect and also the carefulness that we should have in these kind of situations, I think the governor will always consider that as well. So they are not, trying to read anything into the things we do. But if we do actively break the law, there will be fines, yes. And if the EL was supporting that or asking the guide to do it, yes, then the EL will be fined as well, together with the company, maybe even. So they will show that they are not accepting that kind of behavior.
Okay, great. Thank you, Franka. Troels, do you have anything to add regarding this question?
Not really. We totally agree with Franka. It's there's precedence. So field staff has been fined personally, even if they didn't believe that what sort of happened, what they were sort of accused of doing, actually happened in real life. And there's precedence. Be careful. Soda cruising with bears, don't do it. I mean, it's quite simple. You risk a lot by even attempting to go in. Pursuing is also going to places you know where there may be bears in 2 or 3 days' time. If you know there's a carcass on a beach somewhere on the other side of the archipelago, you know it's there. You can't go. That's pursuing. There's precedence there. So just be very, very conservative and very careful.
Great, thank you. This is a really good reminder for people because it's certainly something that has been done as industry standard in the past. So this is a very good, clear message to everybody to that this is not on. Jeff, I see your hand is raised. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just to echo what Troels just said. Yeah, I mean, the days of Zodiac cruising with bears are over and done with, and that's what I was alluding to before. Like, when you come across a bear, you better have a plan of action. But going back to guides being fined and whatnot, it's not unreasonable to search out your own insurance as a field staff guide. I mean, I read your contracts with your different companies and see what you're covered for. I don't know if the operators like to hear me say this, but this is a field staff event anyways. Check it out. I personally carry my own insurance, especially if you're a firearms handler up in the Arctic or something. You know, all it takes is for an event to take place where you are deemed negligent. That can happen by mistake. You can make a mistake and be deemed negligent, and even your operator could come after you. You carry quite a bit of liability on your shoulders, so consider insurance. It's fairly affordable. It depends on what country you live in, but it can be done. So just a heads up.
Sorry, I was muted and talking to myself. Thank you very much, Jeff. What I was saying is that that's a really great point and that the PTGA has been looking into insurance for guides for quite some time. But your point of it depends on which country you're from is very relevant. So I think that it behooves everybody to look into it based on their own home country and it's become more and more important and more relevant. Absolutely. The next question that we wanted to address from the Google Form survey is a discussion around professionalism and safe operations. And the question is, how can ELs work together with captains to make smart decisions and prevent reckless behavior that can put the industry at risk? So we're not 100% sure what this could be referring to, but there have been situations like groundings in Svalbard that perhaps could be avoided. So, Jeff, we just heard from you. I'll come back to you again, but Daniel, perhaps you have some ideas or some thoughts around this, collaborating with captains.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, working with captains and working with ships in general is one of the privileges of the industry. It's so much fun. You know, like when I first got involved in the industry and they handed me a radio and a Zodiac and all this gear, and I was like, yes, this is amazing. And now, you know, 10 or so years later, it's still so much fun because you get to be on the bridge with professionals and you get to like deeply interact with people who are pros at their game. So for me, you know, how can we work with captains, with ship's crews? You know, I guess the question was originally, you know, is to stop reckless behaviors from happening. And for me, like no one goes into anything choosing to be reckless. You know, we become reckless by slowly deviating from what true standards and normals are. So through slow deviation away from normal. And so when I work with captains, we very deliberately and very consciously at the start of every season or trip, we talk about what our agreed normals are. Like, what is the way we've decided is the right way to approach things. And as we start to deviate throughout a trip or throughout a season, we come back together and bring it back to what we say is normal. Like, what is the way we do this? And that way we don't deviate. We don't create new baselines that allow us to think, oh, this is okay. This is an okay place for us to be. It's not. We've moved away from normal over 2 or 3 months of operations. So for me, it's clear communications, especially at the start of every trip, because it's a very convenient restart of operations. So that's the first one, is communicating with the ships. And the second is involving. So really involving captains in our discussions around operations and how they can be involved. And a good example of that is something like, in that discussion before going ashore, you talk to your captains, to your crews, and you say things like, we're going to operate on this part of the land over here. We're going to head up onto the hills over here. This is our plan on shore. The weak parts of our plan are visibility behind the ship or visibility around the corner. Captain, can you please keep me notified if visibility changes or if the ice is moving in? It's engaging and including captains and teams in our operation. And engagement is, I think, the fastest way to get cooperation. It makes them part of our team, just like we are part of their team. So that's, I guess, my first and quickest responses to those questions. So engagement is really important. Communication is the other. So yeah, communication and engagement, kind of obvious things, but worth saying.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Those are great points. And I'm going to go back to you, Jeff, and get your perspective as operations at Aurora. What are your thoughts on the ELs and captains collaborating to avoid issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it comes down to expectations and setting those early on. Like, how do we front load our expedition if you're an EL, or even if you're just a regular staff member? How do you front load that? And typically, you have to set expectations with the captain as well, and they have to set their expectations of you. A closed door meeting before you ever leave the pier or pick up the hook can go a really long way. Making sure that you're both on the same page. That way, when something happens, when something goes down, when you do, I mean, I'm very bear centric, I'm sorry, but when you do encounter a bear when you come around the corner, or even when you're on the ship, what do? What's the plan of action? How do you retreat? These are all things that that can get screwed up pretty easily. And nowadays everything is on social media. I mean, everything is recorded. So the slightest mistake all of a sudden has these bigger consequences than we've ever seen before. And also, if something is going wrong, and I don't think this just applies to relationships with captains, but certainly it does apply there. But like, have the hard conversations. Don't be scared to pull someone aside and say, you know what, like, I'm pretty sure that's against the new regulations. Like, have you checked those out? Obviously there's a lot of ego involved, and obviously there's someone with great responsibility involved, and someone who has to save face if we're talking about a captain. But you can tap the captain on the shoulder also and say, hey, can I just have a little chat with you? And help them save face and get through it. And there's many different kinds of captains. Most are wonderful. There are some with tough exteriors. I think we've all met them, but they also want to do the right thing and want to make good decisions with you and provide the best guest experience possible. So, yeah, don't be afraid to have hard conversations. And so much of this season is going to depend on how we front load things, what we put forward before we ever even leave the pier. So
that's an excellent point. And I think we perhaps take for granted that we as a guiding community are really on top of things like the latest regulations, or just really on top of how important it is not to push the line. And bridge crews aren't always necessarily as aware. So I think that's really great to front load with those conversations and just talk about what the clear boundaries are. Daniel, you put your hand up there.
Oh, thank you, Heather. I think one thing that I often remind myself of when I'm working with captains and bridge teams is that, Like they have their responsibility, just like I have mine. And so often as guides, we ask ourselves, like, why are they going so far away? Why are they anchoring so far away? Why are they doing this? Surely anybody would do it closer or do it differently. And we have to remind ourselves that these people have their specific responsibilities. They're accountable to their companies, to the ship's crew, whatever their supervisors are. And so it's one really important thing is to respect and try and understand their responsibility, but also to communicate your own. So as an expedition leader or a guide, communicating to your captain, yes, you are responsible for the safety of the vessel. I am responsible to our obligations towards AECO. Let's both work together to fulfill our mutual responsibilities. And my experience is that captains, like you say, Heather, it's a fantastic point that bridge teams they're not like living in the world of AECO or IATO or whatever place you're in the world. They live in the world of, the Polar Code. All right. They live in the world of IMO. That's their world. And for us to be able to say to them, hey, guys, this is my thing. I'll look after this side of it. Right. We'll communicate on this, but I'll help you with that, is often a huge relief to them. It's a huge reminder to them that their offsider, their expedition leader, who is their support in the industry, in the expedition world, is there for them and will support them in this extremely vague world. They don't like vague systems because they come from a very clear systems-oriented structure of training. And we say, welcome to our vague world, welcome to our world of nebulous concepts, and we're here to help. And most captains I've worked with have really respected and appreciated that role on board. But the other thing that I found that really helps, and then I'll put my hand down, Michael, and you can go ahead, is that linking off from that is that system, like bridges love systems. They love to hear process and see that you've thought things through. And so one of the most powerful tools that we have is to be on the bridge before our operations and talk through our process with officers using our WET app or our Seafarer's Triangle or the OVERAT, whatever system we're using. If we can articulate our system, it helps us because we spy our own mistakes, but also bridges love seeing that we have systems because they have them too. And it helps them to respect your decisions more and more and respect your decision later on when you say, hey, Captain, I'm not really comfortable where we are. And they go, well, that's okay, Dan, because I know you're a systems guy. I know you're not saying it for any, vague reason. You've got an answer here for me. So those are two comments that I would have coming off the back of Jeff there.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And definitely let's throw over to Michael. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, Daniel just touched on this briefly, but it is really important as well to note that most of these bridge teams and captains have a marine operations department that has a very specific set of operational criteria they have to follow. And it's about mixing and matching and marrying what we're trying to achieve for guests and what they're trying to achieve for the safety of the vessel, because I think you'll find that the majority of our captains are likewise focused on a positive guest experience. And there is a commonality there that all expedition leaders can bridge that gap and find that, like both Jeff and Dan alluded to. So especially for any staff that work with larger operators that have multiple vessels, that marine operations department will certainly have its fair share of a say in how voyages are deployed from a bridge point of view. So it's really important for expedition leaders to have their finger on the pulse of that. But likewise, to candidly share that information with their teams as well if it's going to impact how we're operating.
Excellent point. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to just shift again really quickly and do another poll just to make sure that everyone is plugged in here. So the next poll is, do you hold a PTGA status or certificate? So there's either no status, a polar guide aspirant, polar guide, senior polar guide, or assessor. So we've still got 50 people online, pretty fantastic. And we'll give you a minute to choose your status and let us know, or no status, and see who's with us here today. After that, we're going to go into a Q&A session. So we'll be answering some more of your questions. And that will be our final section for today. All right, no status, 47%, okay? Polar guide aspirant, we've got 12%, polar guide 12%, senior polar guide 24%, and assessor 6%. Well, it's a really interesting cross-section. Okay, Excelente. Well, that takes us into the Q&A, and actually, if I go into the Q&A here, the first question is relevant to all the folks with no status. This anonymous attendee says, I realize this may not be quite the correct forum, but for an outdoor professional, it can be difficult to enter the industry without existing polar experience. Would you have any advice on training programs or experiences that would be viewed most favorably by operators for them to gain employment? Or is it much more reliant on your professional network or any other advice you might share for a guide trying to get into the polar industry? And I am going to tap Graham Charles for this one because I think you might have some a good insight for this questioner.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, folks. I would like to compliment our panel kind of more under the heading of maturation of the industry, and I'll do that after I answer this question, or hopefully, I'm not sure whether I can answer it, but whether I can put some insight. Part of our changing industry is, as I have seen it since the establishment of the PTGA, in creating industry standards back in 2016, is that they're now, we've kind of turned a corner, I believe, and that there's a lot of people who are really consciously curating their CVs with a very definite goal of what they want to do in terms of getting a job in the industry. And that's a good thing. The problem is that there are loads of other people doing it as well. And so relative to this person's question about, are there programs you can do? Yes, there are more small entrepreneurial businesses being set up around, I say the world, but you only have to go online to find some of those providers who are providing polar guide specific training programs. And they generally work with the Polar Tourism Guides Association, because for those of you, if you don't know, then the PTGA is the exam. We are not the training body, but we are the standards test, and working with a number of providers for that. So yes, there are places you can go around the world and you can get trained specifically to the syllabi and just good ground skills that these number of training providers have. Will that get you into a job? The answer is possibly, but as going back to where I started off with, there's a lot of people now really well curating their CVs to get ready for a job. And currently, from where I sit, there is a glut of guides. There is a reduction in departures and staff positions. And the dog. Thanks, Charles. And this is proving hard. This is making it difficult for new folks in the industry. So there's not much I can do, not much I can say about that. To the second part of your question about, are professional links still important? The answer is yes, absolutely. The other part is, yes, so make those connections. You've just got to put yourself out there. A lot of people will contact the PTGA and ask that question, how can I get a start? Because getting a start seems to be important and tricky. Then I don't really have anything to say other than if you've targeted some specific training and development for yourself, curating your CV, but also contacting people that sooner and being ready to go, because this is one thing we do know about this industry, is that people drop out of contracts at last minute quite regularly, and to keep in touch with some of the social media platforms that are available. So Heather, I don't know, from what you're reading on the question, is there anything else you're looking for from me for that?
There's actually a couple of other questions that came in on the questionnaire that are related. One is, how can I get assessed prior to getting hired? And the second one, how can you get PTGA qualifications without your company being an accredited provider? I don't know if you're able to give insight on either of those.
Thanks for that. Two really good questions, and probably two of the most common questions that come into the PTGA office. Can you get assessed prior to a contract? Yes, you can. So technically, that is a true statement. The problem with it and the restriction is that the number of places where you can do that is relatively small around the world. You need to go to one of our training and assessment providers, who I was talking about in the previous question, and you're able to do assessments with them. Even if you know outfits in Canada or in Denmark, the Expedition Guide Academy, they can do assessments without you having to do the full guide course if you want to. If you're a guide already and you believe you have the skills and competency that are in the various syllabi that the PTGA has, and you are ready for the exam, then you can turn up and ask to just be examined. And if they want to do that as part of their business, then that is possible. And we are working with our growing group of assessors to try to create more opportunity and small off-season businesses for our assessors to be able to do this. So we're aware that it's limited, but we're trying to fix that. Can you get assessed without being working for an accredited provider? The answer is yes. It is more difficult. The reason it's much easier with an accredited provider company is because those companies work with the PTGA and to the PTGA's requirements, and because of that, they are able to do it. That's part of how the PTGA works and how we're able to monetize and keep ourselves running and developing and keeping things going that way. And so, of course, we want all guides to, if you're unhappy with that, then I can only apologize, or we can only apologize. But talk to your company. The more companies that will work with us and help guides ultimately, I believe is better for the industry as a whole. And it will go towards what I wanted to say in the beginning of this, but really encouraged by, here we are in 2025, we're in a pre-Arctic pre-season webinar. And just, I want to say thanks to Daniel for just outlining a couple of things there. But one of your frameworks, Daniel, you mentioned the idea of professionalism. And as I sat and listened to our panelists, I've heard people bringing up the idea of front loading. I've heard the number of times our panelists have talked about clear communications, about being careful and about being professional, I think is really, really poignant, and I thank you all for doing that. And I think, of anything for this pre-season conference, for whether you're a guide or an EL or an administrator or a company owner, that's where we have to go. And to see this level of professionalism as it is in 2025, to think how this conversation might have been 10 years ago or 15 years ago, to think that people are valuing and guides are being given this advice to have super clear communications with your captains, with your ELs. This works for guides as well. And it has to be a two-way street. This isn't just the EL who gets to have clear communications and be directive. If you are a guide, then you deserve to understand what that clear to the EL plan of attack with Jeff's polar bears, what that plan of attack actually is. And if you are unclear, then please, this level of professional communication needs to be had in all directions so that you don't walk into those particular problems as well. But really appreciate all of the panelists from that point of view, because it's been really fantastic to see this level of professionalism, to hear these concepts. It's not about gnarly guides driving super fast and getting the biggest bears and all the rest of it, but about clear communications. What is your plan? Thinking about what it is that you're going to do next and being accountable for that. And I can only say, yes, I agree with that entirely. And if I was ELing or working with ELs, would be to say, yep, you need to have answers for everything in this day and age. And that speaks hopefully to Troels and the trade association requirements, but also to Dan, Michael, and Jeff on the ground. You have to answer to yourself as a pro, to your guests and to your staff, and you have to do a lot of thinking about why are we doing this and what is a great plan. So I thank you for that.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Graham. That was really, really helpful. Also, just to anyone who wants to check out the chat and is interested, there's a link that Sarah posted to the PTGA training and assessment providers that's listed on our website, just in relation to if you want to get trained and assessed. There is a question in our Q&A from one of our attendees specifically about, this is for Franka. Franka told us that there is nothing really new about the regulations for, quote, being a guide on Svalbard in the future, but is there at least any acknowledgement from the authorities that being a certified PTGA guide might help achieving that status instead of being treated like a, quote, newbie guide as seen from the authorities' perspective?
It depends. No, but I would say from the discussions we had, and I think also the others can confirm that there will be definitely they will be looking into what they can cross credit. So I doubt that they will say like, no, that's only one certification and only that one that you will take on Svalbard is valid on Svalbard. I doubt that highly. To what level, that I cannot say. But I'm quite sure that for some parts, they will look into that. But of course, depending on how that guide certification will look like, it might be that some of it is quite heavy on the land-based part, because that's what Svalbard is also a lot about. It is about snowmobile driving and hiking and kayaking and dog mushing and so on. So we will see how they're going to deal with that. So if they only gonna do like a basic one that is the same for everyone, or if there's more to it at the end.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks very much. We have one more question from a live attendee, Michael Jackson. Is there a way for the PTGA or AECO to give us a summary of the changes for this year? New rules in Svalbard, Greenland, Canada, etc., in addition to some suggested strategies for avoiding trouble. I suppose that's what this whole webinar is, but maybe Troels, is there any intention to make a sort of quick reference sheet?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Huh? It's a very good question. This is the Svalbard regulations that come into force this year, but January 1st this year. It's a huge amount of legislation, tiny details and wordings in the law, not all of which is in English. Unfortunately, I haven't checked the last couple of weeks, but for example, the governor's website on the sites that are restricted, the law has been translated into English, but the appendix showing the actual areas that are restricted is not there. It's only in the Norwegian version of the law. So the Appendix 6, which is essential to the entire law for any understanding of it, you'd have to find a Norwegian version, unless they changed it sort of within the last couple of weeks. Stuff like that. It is very tricky to come up with a summary. That's also because in our situation in AECO, we're not in a position to interpret the law for anyone, because we can't be liable. We can point out what exactly the law says, and we can advise, for example, the bears, be very conservative. I mean, there's a definition of what it means to disturb a bear. It's official. It was made by the Norwegian authorities. But when you hear the governor speaking about it, he is also talking about, well, common sense and be careful, and then you're going to be fine. And so what it says in the law, in the wording of the law, is not necessarily the same sort of signals we get from the governor himself, for example. So it can be extremely difficult to give a very sort of clear-cut summary of everything. I mean, we're trying the very best we can to inform our members. We have information on the website, of course. We have all these things in all the Boost database live schedule has been updated to overhead, so on and so forth. It's been updated with all the relevant information. It's sort of scattered, obviously, by site, but still, the governor's website have information, and that's probably the best advice I can give. It's not so easy, unfortunately, to just give a quick summary of the bullet points, the 10 bullet points, golden bullet points, and then if you don't do that, you're going to be fine. It's I wouldn't probably put my head on a block and do that, I'm afraid. Sorry.
All right, thanks, Troels. Graham, you've had your hand up for a bit.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, I just wanted to hopefully speak to the question that you posed to Franka then about would there be any recognition of PTGA awards in Svalbard? Franka's answer was completely competent. I just want to add for our members and people who run into these things that our lobby and your message as a guide to authorities, if you have any interaction with them in a nice way, or companies you deal with, the basic lobbying message, the best that we can all do is based around the word equivalency. Because we are not saying that PTGA awards are the best or we are the one or anything like that. All we ask, whether we're working in Svalbard or Greenland or Canada or anywhere else, is consideration of equivalency. And that is the key term. So if you are dealing, any of you who are members, you want to join the lobby and that message, then that's what we're looking for. The reason why we are not, we don't want to be the only one, but we recognize these sovereign nations, and it's important that they have their own way to do things. But this is 2025, and this job and this profession means that guides move around a lot, and we know that people, the pay rate isn't equivalent to the amount of work and professionalism and time put in. And if you're going to go and work in Canada and then go across to Greenland on a boat and then go to Iceland and then go to Svalbard, then there is no way that companies and guides should be expected to have each different sovereign nation's guiding standards, when a lot of this stuff, as we know, is not rocket science. How you lead a hike competently and manage safety and interpret professionally in Svalbard is not that much different to what you will be doing in Greenland. There will be some local specific knowledge, and we cover that stuff for those of you who get into these conversations with fellow guides, and we encourage this sort of debate. We cover those things with some generic statements in all of our awards, which basically says that if you're a professional guide and you end up in a new place, you've never guided in Svalbard before, while plenty of the field guiding competencies are exactly the same as they would be if you were leading a hike in Greenland, there is local knowledge. So the expectation of a professional guide is that before you go and lead a hike in Svalbard, you find out what local information you need before you head on to that tundra, whether it's AECO rules and regulations, whether it's Svalbard guidelines and restrictions, whether it's, as someone pointed out earlier about using drones, all of that stuff. Part of being a professional, rather than just leading hikes or driving Zodiacs and things, is arriving in that place and being prepared and then asking the next question. And so as guides, please join that lobby group. If you're working with companies who say you must have this, then don't be afraid to push back and say, well, I have this is equivalent, and know what's in there and the reasons behind it.
Great, thank you very much, Graham. And Franka, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add quickly, coming back to the bear. So the law is very clear, and the regulation changes are very clear. I believe it is absolutely no gray area in there. It is, if you see a bear, you leave the area. And at the moment, you have to stay 500 meters away, and later on, you have to be 300 meters away. But even if you see a bear at 300 meters, you don't hang out and watch the bear and wait the law to be broken. You just remove yourself from the area. It's very easy. Like the idea of the law is to protect the wildlife. And that I think is really important to point out, and that will be what the government will look at. Like, how are we behaving, and what are we doing? And if we show that we understand what they're trying to achieve, then there will be professionalism from both sides. But if we're trying to find gray areas and pushing the borders, then of course it's not going to be that easy. So I think it is very clear, and on the governor's website you can see the regulation changes. They're going to be very strict on drone flying. It's completely forbidden now in any of the natural parks. So that's really important to point out, to make sure that these kind of changes are understood, not by just the expedition team, but also by the photographers, by guests that maybe bring drones with them. So it's just really important that the expedition leaders, or also the companies maybe in this case, take on the responsibility to make sure that it is well understood what the law states.
Excellent. Thank you, Franka. And Troels, you have a comment?
Yeah, just quickly, that the gray area to me is that the law can be broken outside the 300 meters and 500 meters areas as well. It can be broken at any distance to the bear, 2 kilometers distance, and the bear reacts to your presence, you've broken the law. That's the gray area where I find it very hard to navigate in practical terms. What are you going to do and how are you going to avoid it? You know, if you turn a corner and you had no idea, and you can leave, yeah, but damage done already.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We do have one more question, and it's a question for you, Troels. The attendee asks, can you provide an update on how walrus regulations have changed in Svalbard? Is it 150 meters now, the distance for zodiacs from haul out? Any change from land approach?
Yeah, also a good question. Now I have to admit that the actual law on the approach for walrus haul outs from zodiacs, the distance is eludes me at the moment for what the law actually states. The change that we did to our guidelines is the closest distance to a haul out on land. You have to keep that distance even if the walrus comes to you from the shore, from the sea. So if this walrus is curious and comes in to check you out, you have to go away to keep the 30 meters. It was a situation from last year that caused that change to come into the guidelines for this year. I think actually the AECO guidelines have been pretty clear, or well within the law change that have come up already in the past. From the you know, if we have you have to land at least 300 meters away from the haul out, so the 300 meters distance to haul outs by Zodiac is something we've done for a while, and I think the law is. Franka, do you remember straight up?
It's 150 meters.
It is 150 meters, yeah, I think.
And
but
you have
AECO
to drive
guidelines are
less than 5 knots, 300 meters.
exactly speed limit as well. So all these things are well within the original guidelines of AECO, and we've never had a problem with that part of the new regulation. So
great, thank you. Okay, we do have one more question that just popped up, and then we'll wrap it up for the day. We'll throw this to Jeff, because it says, Jeff mentioned companies going out to sea at 12 nautical miles and beyond. What is the significance of 12 nautical miles?
Yeah, 12 nautical miles, you're in international waters. So in theory, the regulations of the mainland or Svalbard or Greenland don't apply out there. Still, if you're an AECO company, you have a duty to operate underneath those guidelines in any interaction, and there's a lot of responsibility. We talked about what could negatively affect the industry, and I mentioned social media before. You can't not think about that at this point in time. So anything that happens out there in the pack ice is going to be heard of as well. And for the layman out there, or for these government institutions to see negative negative reporting. It doesn't matter what the ship, what it says on the side of the ship. It's the expedition cruise industry that gets hit. So, you know, I don't know. When you're operating out there, keep in mind that you have a huge responsibility as well.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Well, folks, we are just up almost at 90 minutes. I want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists. This was a fantastic discussion. There was so much engagement, really great questions from our attendees. And yeah, it's just really nice for everyone to get on the same page in advance of what I'm sure will be a very successful and interesting season. Franka, you had your hand up. Did you want to say something before we wrap?
Just very quickly, because that's going to affect the next couple of weeks. So we already have cruise ships coming up on Svalbard, and they're of course using this little like hole that you can go on land anywhere you want to until the 25th of May. But please be aware that there are still areas you're not allowed to go. So if those areas are closed, they are closed all year round. So be careful. And also, I think it starts on the 12th or 11th of May when the bird areas are closed as well. So be careful that you're not missing the dates there.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much again to all of our panelists. I also want to thank some folks behind the scenes. So Sarah, who's been managing our tech, she's just an absolute star. We also have Alexandra Hansen, who's done a ton of the prep work to pull this together, and Pascal Terry, who has been doing our promo and our media, social media stuff. Just an amazing team to pull this all together. So thank you to everyone. And thank you again from me. I do want to throw it over very briefly to Graham Troels, our PTGA founder, for some final words.
Wow. Well, no, exactly as you say, Heather, thank you to those people. And yeah, I think what I was ranting about before is really it. And as all of our panelists have said, if you need to go into 2025 Arctic and then Antarctic, update your definition of being a professional in this industry, update your skills in communication, clarity of communication up and down or sideways, left or right, whichever way you want to think about it, with your teams, with your captains and crews that you're dealing with, because this has to be the new normal for us to think that this is sustainable, to offer ourselves as professionals. And hopefully keep this thing growing so it's a healthy career choice. But thank you for everybody attending live and watching later on recorded. And thanks to our panelists. It's been a really really great discussion. And thanks for your time.
Thanks, everyone.